Welcome to Military Analytics. The war between Ukraine and Russia began to flare up in the Crimean Peninsula and the Black Sea. Ukraine's pressure on its ultimate goal of Crimea, reducing the effectiveness of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, and efforts to neutralize the logistics network from the Kerch Bridge have intensified in recent days. The final step in a series of attacks came on Wednesday morning when the Russian warship was targeted. A striking attack at dawn on Wednesday morning targeted a Russian Navy spy ship in the Black Sea. Moscow said on Wednesday that a Russian warship had been attacked by Ukraine near the Bosphorus Strait. Russia said on Wednesday that it had repelled Ukraine's attack on one of its warships in Turkish territorial waters with drones. The latest sabotage attempt that Moscow blames on Kiev, one of Vladimir Putin's most modern spy warships, has been attacked by 3 drones in the Black Sea. And shocking new images have emerged. The intense clip broadcast on state television by Russia's defense ministry shows how a high-speed unmanned boat rushes from the water's surface towards Moscow's Ivan Kur's reconnaissance ship. The spy ship immediately began evasive maneuvers and began firing at oncoming unmanned surface ships. The first barrage from Russia's warship missed the unmanned surface vehicles. A suspected Ukrainian sea surface drone was seen dodging fire from its target just before being hit. A Ukrainian sea surface drone rodeo with a Russian warship, and its skills drew attention. Operators proved successful in handling the device. The drone exploded instantly when it was hit. However, the drone was hit directly at the crest of a wave and instantly turned into a massive fireball just meters from its target. The Russian Ministry of Defense did not provide information on how much damage Ivan Kurz received in the attack, which it said was carried out by Ukrainian unmanned speedboats in the Black Sea. However, in the images released by Russia, the contact of the surface drones and the Russian warship and how the explosion took place is not clear. It is highly probable that the Russian warship was damaged as a result of this attack. The Kremlin once again witnessed the power of Ukraine. This striking attack shocked the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, and the Kremlin administration because the images were perhaps the clearest frames ever taken at sea. Russian sources suggested that the Ukrainian armed forces were responsible for the attack. After initial reports suggested that the drones were launched from civilian ships, Kiev has yet to comment on the attack. All 3 drones were destroyed, and the attack took place about 140 kilometers, 87 miles northeast of the Bosphorus. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, Moscow added that the Russian vessel was tasked with protecting the pipeline infrastructure in Turkey's economic waters. Turkey did not immediately respond to Russia's allegations. Turkstream carries gas from Russia's Taman Peninsula west along the Black Sea to a point west of the Bosphorus. However, the Blue Stream crosses the eastern Black Sea from north to south and descends 700 kilometers east of the Bosphorus. Kiev did not comment on the attack. The attempt to shoot Ivan Kurz came as smoke rose from the massive £3 billion Crimean bridge controlled by Russia, raising suspicions that it was also under attack. The Ivan Kurz is a reconnaissance ship equipped with advanced radio and visual sensors, as well as electronic warfare capabilities, and is one of only 2 ships of this type in the Russian Navy. The ship is equipped with various radio reconnaissance and electronic warfare complexes as well as communication systems to ensure fleet management. The ship was designed to monitor anti-missile defense systems, while the exact composition of its equipment is unknown. As a reconnaissance ship, it's equipped with several pedestal machine gun mounts for the 14.5 mm squared KPVT and several MLNPAD's portable air defense systems. There are 120 sailors on board. Ukrainian drones and uncrewed surface ships USVSVS are putting pressure on Russia's Black Sea forces. Unmanned aerial vehicles have made the northern Black Sea a much higher-risk environment for Russia. He also shifted Russian ships further south in the Black Sea after the sinking of Moskva on April 14. In particular, Ukrainian UAV and USV attacks were recorded in Sevastopol in late October 2022 and March 2023. After the first, Putin suspended Russia's participation in the grain deal. The UN and Ankara brokered a deal to mitigate the effects of Russia's blockade. Ukrainian food exports, which have become a key tactic in the Black Sea. Some reports claim that the reserve flagship Admiral Grigorovich-class frigate, Admiral Makarov, was damaged in the October attack. Despite Ukraine's anti-ship missiles seriously restraining Russia in the northern Black Sea, it did not give Ukraine long-range capabilities to hit Moscow's ships in the heart of Sevastopol. For this, Ukraine turned to vehicles such as USVs and UAVs. The use of USVs influenced Russia's decision to divert some of its ships from Sevastopol. The use of uncrewed surface ships and drones became one of the most important developments on the sea side of the Russo-Ukrainian War. Russia is locked in a kind of naval stalemate with Ukraine in this closed sea under Turkish control. Geographically speaking, it is now possible for the Russians to tow their ships outside the Sea of Azov. But the Russians can only do it there, not everywhere. The depths will allow the fleet they have in the Black Sea to pass international legislation, and sanctions will not allow them to leave the Black Sea through the Bosphorus. So the Russian Navy found itself in a kind of trap. According to a senior Ukrainian military intelligence official, Russia has shifted most of its Black Sea Fleet warships from its main base in Crimea to safer waters on Russian soil. Ukraine's deputy head of military intelligence, Major General Vadim Skibitsky, said the Kremlin had decided to relocate the ships for fear of missile attacks, but it could not be independently confirmed that the ships of the Black Sea Fleet were relocated. The official primary headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet is located in Sevastopol, the largest city in Crimea, and the site of numerous drone strikes in recent weeks. While Ukraine has not admitted responsibility for the drone strikes, Kremlin-appointed Sevastopol Governor Mikhail Hadjiyev said Kiev was behind the attacks, which reportedly caused a massive fire at an oil depot in the area. According to a translation of Skibitsky's comments by online publication Ukrainska Pravda, Russia's Naval High Command has sent most of the Black Sea Fleet ships from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk, Russia. According to Ukrainska Pravda, Skibitsky said, "We see that the Russians are afraid this space, and other military installations in Sevastopol are currently tightly guarded. The invaders are equipping their positions to protect against attacks on this infrastructure." Skibitsky noted that the warships were moved to Novorossiysk about 20 miles from Sevastopol. He described Novorossiysk, located on the eastern coast of the Black Sea in Russia's southern Kuban region, well outside the possible anti-ship missile launch areas in the Ukrainian-controlled area. It is possible that Russian planners predicted that if the Ukrainian offensive allowed positioning closer to Russia's naval stations, the ships could come within range of missiles such as HIMARS. Some experts point out that Putin's possible naval strategy in the Black Sea failed even before the flagship Moscow sank in April 2022. At least 18 ships and boats of the Black Sea Fleet have been sunk or badly damaged since the beginning of the war. This is more than 20% of the pre-war combat power, which consisted of 74 ships and boats. In 1990, the Black Sea Fleet consisted of 800 ships, 274 of which were combat. But then it began to decline sharply at the beginning of the war with Ukraine. The Russian fleet consisted of 275 ships and boats, of which only 58 fought. Thus, there were 5 times fewer warships than in Soviet times. The overall ship composition was reduced by a factor of 3. The Black Sea Fleet, together with patrol boats, had 74 combat units by February 2022. As proof of Ukraine's capacity to attack the Russian Navy, he cited examples such as the Ukrainian offensive that resulted in the sinking of the Black Sea Fleet's flagship Moscow in April 2022. Russia's Black Sea Fleet was, in some respects, at least reduced to a coastal power. This development contains lessons for U.S. planners. However, Moscow's primary purpose of fighting other ships was not well suited to this war, and eliminating its air defense capabilities was not as much of a strategic loss for Russia as it might have been. It meant that Russia's Black Sea Fleet lost its primary air defense platform after Moskva sank. The fleet could no longer move safely along the Ukrainian coast. The sinking of Moskva drew attention to Russia's Black Sea Fleet. According to some experts, this force ultimately failed to exert much influence in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Some analysts argue that Russia's Northern Fleet lacks the nuclear deterrence and tools to make a difference for Russia. But according to experts, the collapse of Moskva particularly highlighted a threat. Ukraine's dangerous stockpile of anti-ship missiles represented the damage they could inflict not only on Russia's physical Black Sea Fleet but also on Putin's reputation. The trenches of eastern Ukraine flared up again, seriously, from the Donetsk region to Luhansk. The Ukrainians continued their grand offensive plans to take control of the eastern front lines. This time, HIMARS missile systems, which are in the inventory of the Ukrainian army, took the stage on the battlefield. Ukrainian fighters launched a series of very successful HIMARS attacks. The activation of the Ukrainian HIMARS crew is explained by the redeployment of Russian troops in the direction of Bakhmut. Because this redeployment creates an excellent opportunity to detect, track, and destroy concentrations of Russian forces. The target of the first HIMARS attacks was once again Mariupol. Local residents reported hearing multiple explosions. The Ukrainian Mariupol mayor's advisor reported that 24 soldiers were killed and 37 soldiers were injured as a result of attacks on other facilities in Mariupol. The Russians also lost a large number of vehicles of various types. Among the losses of the Russians were the M113 battleships, because local residents noticed how the Russians transported these destroyed battleships through the city. It was also claimed that Russian air defense shot down HIMARS rockets near the Azovstal industrial area in Mariupol. Many facilities in this area are used by Russian forces as headquarters or weapons depots. In addition, Ukrainian sources reported that in addition to the Russian command centers in Mariupol, there is an underground facility used as a high-level command point for Russian forces operating in Volodar and Zaporizhia regions. This facility was also destroyed as a result of the HIMARS attacks. The raising of this mysterious Russian underground command center attracted a lot of attention. On the other hand, in addition to the attacks in and around Mariupol, more HIMARS attacks were recorded on a different front line of the Donetsk region. The Russian Independent Investigative Agency reported that a Ukrainian HIMARS attack destroyed up to 90 tanks east of Marinka. The target of another Ukrainian HIMARS attack was the city of Tokmak, located on the southern front line. He informed the appointed president of Russia that there have been numerous explosions confirmed in the attacks in this city. In line with these explanations, as it was revealed that there were at least 2 explosions as a result of the attacks in Tokmak. After all these attacks, a critical assessment had a wide repercussion on the war agenda. The frequency and intensity of HIMARS attacks are likely to continue to increase, especially as Norway and the United Kingdom agreed to supply Ukraine with ATEM-270 artillery systems similar to HIMARS, but with twice as many rockets. After another night of surviving some of the most intense bombardments with incendiary munitions like HIMARS when it came to Bakhmut, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense reported that the last troops still present on the outskirts of the city had finally been ordered to withdraw to Ivanovsky. This is confirmed by the numerous videos showing the Ukrainians making their way from the southern outskirts towards Ivanovsky, as well as the fact that the Russians mostly bombarded the wooded roads between Bakhmut and Ivanovsky in general, destabilizing the situation on the flanks of Bakhmut and forcing the Russians to send reinforcements. The Ukrainians managed to destroy more heavy equipment during the displacement than during the storm operation of the flanks, which the Russians tried to strengthen. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, have made great progress on many front lines, thanks to the HIMARS long-range missile systems. HIMARS, manufactured by Lockheed Martin, stands for High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. HIMARS is one of the most advanced rocket artillery systems in the world. Its range is longer than anything the Ukrainians have. So when transferred, they have the ability to hit targets behind the front lines, deeper and with much more accuracy. HIMARS is considered the most effective weapon for attacking fixed targets such as infrastructure and troops in a dense area. Experts say that HIMARS rockets are an integral part of Ukraine in terms of defensive and offensive capacity in the war against Russia. HIMARS has liberated strategically important Ukrainian cities and territories, most likely not otherwise. So how did Ukraine use HIMARS rockets against Russia? HIMARS rockets were particularly effective in countering the Russian offensive in the Donbass, allowing Ukraine to attack Russian supply and ammunition depots. HIMARS long-range missile systems were also crucial in forcing Russia to withdraw from Kherson. This was only possible because the Ukrainians had the expanded offensive capability to demolish these bridges without HIMARS. The Ukrainians would have had a hard time retaking Kherson until the New Year's attack. HIMARS rockets were mostly used to target Russian infrastructure. On the other hand, the USA supplied Ukraine with at least 20 HIMARS launchers. The US's announcements to supply the weapons in June were part of a larger $700 million military aid package. The Russians, on the other hand, shared confusing assessments on this issue to push the HIMARS attacks of the Ukrainian forces into the background. Russian media outlets claimed that Russian forces used electronic jammers to disable the system's GPS targeting mechanism, causing the missiles to miss the target. Despite Russia's statements, it is accepted that the GPS-guided rockets of the HIMARS system, which can hit targets from long distances, changed the course of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Ukrainian military uses the systems to carry out targeted attacks on military ammunition depots and supply routes in Russia's occupied territories. However, the HIMARS missiles currently used by Ukraine have a range of 80 kilometers and cannot reach many Russian-occupied areas. The United States has been reluctant to provide Ukrainian forces with the long-range Army tactical missile systems ATACMS that Ukraine has been demanding for months. The ATACMS has a range of up to 300 kilometers, but since the war began, the Biden administration and the U.S. Congress have directed more than $75 billion in humanitarian, financial, and military aid to Ukraine. In other words, there is still the possibility of the U.S. sending longer-range missile systems to the Ukrainian army. In addition, dozens of other countries, including most members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the European Union, are providing large aid packages to Ukraine. Much of the aid went to providing the weapons systems, training, and intelligence Ukrainian commanders needed to defend against Russia, which has one of the most powerful armies in the world. Many Western analysts say military aid by the United States and other allies has played a crucial role in Ukraine's defense and counterattack against Russia. The U.S. and its allied leaders view the invasion of Russia as a brutal and illegal offensive war on NATO borders that, if successful, will subdue millions of Ukrainians. The Ukrainian army blew up a supply bridge used by Russian forces to organize ammunition deliveries to Ukrainian territory. The patience of the Russian soldiers who have been waiting for weeks on Ukrainian territory without ammunition has run out while the whole world is waiting for the end of the 15-month-long war between Russia and Ukraine. The war is escalating thanks to the strategic air operation carried out by the Ukrainian army. Russian forces have been dealt another major blow after the Ukrainian intelligence service detected that Russia was going to organize a new military shipment. The Ukrainian army blew up the supply bridge in Zaporizhia with long-range missiles. In the first months of the war, the Ukrainian army showed great resistance against the Russian forces and managed to stop the rapid advance of the Russian army in Ukraine. With the decision taken by the Ukrainian General Staff, the Ukrainian army made a major change in its strategy and began to destroy the supply routes and ammunition depots used by the Russian forces instead of the positions of the Russian army. The Ukrainian authorities, who thought that this new strategy would greatly break the power of Russian troops on Ukrainian territory, were quite right. As it is known, the Ukrainian army has destroyed many supply routes and bridges to prevent Russian forces. The Irpin Bridge, which was previously destroyed by the Ukrainian army, was one of these bridges. This bridge, which was destroyed because the Russian army was getting too close to Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, was one of the moments that changed the course of the war. Thus, the Russian army was prevented from entering Kiev, and the Ukrainian army was able to create a great defense line here. Another one of the bridges that was blown up was the Henichis Bridge. The way this bridge was blown up was quite tragic. This bridge, which Ukrainian sailor-soldier Vitaly Kakun exploded by sacrificing himself, managed to enter the agenda of the whole world. This move by the heroic Ukrainian soldier Vitaly Kakun prevented the advance of Russian troops entering Ukrainian territory through Belarus. Then the advance of the Russian troops could not be prevented after hours of fighting by the Ukrainian army. The heroic Ukrainian soldier moved onto the bridge with the vehicle and activated the bombs he brought with him to stop the advance of the Russian tanks. The bridge was destroyed within seconds, preventing Russian tanks from entering the city. This heroic resistance of Ukrainian soldiers was highly appreciated on the world agenda. Now, the Ukrainian army has struck a major blow to the Russian forces by destroying one of the most frequently used bridges of the Russian army in the Zaporizhia region. With the addition of a new one to the destroyed bridges, the number of delivery routes that the Russian army can use in Ukrainian territory has been greatly reduced. The Russian army's inability to capture the city of Bakhmut for months has caused great panic in the Kremlin palace. Thanks to the Ukrainian army's resistance in Bakhmut, the Russian army is suffering hundreds of casualties every day on the Bakhmut front. Russian General Valery Gerasimov, who is the commander of the Russian army in Ukrainian territory, has decided to send more than 800 Russian soldiers from Ukraine to the Bakhmut front to completely occupy the city of Bakhmut. However, there are not enough weapons and ammunition in Bakhmut for these soldiers. The Ukrainian intelligence service was aware that if the Russian army carried out this military deployment, it would also have to carry out a new shipment of ammunition. Therefore, it was aware that these ammunition convoys from Crimea into Ukrainian territory would have to pass through the Zaporizhia bridge. When the Ukrainian intelligence service officials shared this information with the Ukrainian army commanders, the Ukrainian army took action to blow up this bridge. Ukrainian troops stationed in the city of Dnipro could have easily destroyed the Zaporizhia bridge with long-range HIMARS missiles. Ukrainian soldiers who entered the coordinates obtained from satellite images into the HIMARS missile systems wasted no time and launched the operation to blow up the bridge by firing the missiles. The Zaporizhia bridge was blown up within minutes and went underwater within seconds. According to the information obtained from regional sources, it was learned that with the explosion of the bridge, Russian troops in the Zaporizhia region took a defensive position. The absence of any air defense system around this bridge surprised everyone with the explosion of the bridge. The ammunition shipment planned by Russian General Valery Gerasimov was postponed to another date. At the same time, it is thought that the large-scale attack on Bakhmut was cancelled due to the lack of ammunition and weapons. Victory celebrations were held in the Ukrainian parliament after the bridge was blown up. Vladimir Putin's recent setbacks are putting a strain on both the Russian military and the Russian economy. Russian leader Vladimir Putin is making great efforts to reopen these destroyed bridges and shipping routes. He is aware that otherwise, he will not be able to deliver ammunition and weapons to Russian troops in Ukraine. But it is not only the Ukrainian army that is targeting the supply routes in Ukraine. Pro-Ukrainian insurgents have also targeted many shipping routes and railroads due to Vladimir Putin's aggressive policies against minority citizens. Minority people living in Crimea and many autonomous republics are very angry with Putin. With Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukrainian territory, the anger of these minority citizens against Putin has increased even more. Thus, resistance organizations were established in many regions, especially in Crimea. The main goal of these resistance organizations is to stop Vladimir Putin's activities both in Ukraine and on the Crimean Peninsula. In their statements on their social media accounts, the leaders of the resistance organizations say that the Crimean Peninsula will regain its independence very soon and that they will fight to the end to end the occupation of Ukrainian territory by the Russian army. Recently, the pro-Ukrainian resistance organizations have been putting Vladimir Putin in a very difficult situation. In the first months of the war, these resistance organizations operated only in Ukraine and the Crimean Peninsula. But now they have started to operate within the borders of Russia. Vladimir Putin is completely responsible for this, as it is known. There have been many explosions and fires in Russia recently. These explosions and fires in the ammunition depots of the Russian army and Putin's natural gas facilities have started to make the Russian people very uneasy. Putin is blamed for the ease with which pro-Ukrainian insurgents can attempt sabotage in Russia. Vladimir Putin has forced many Ukrainian citizens living in the occupied regions of Ukraine to live in Russia. The Russian leader sent many officials to the regions occupied by the Russian army and started issuing Russian passports to Ukrainian citizens living there. Thus, these citizens were taken to the borders of Russia and forced to live there. Now these Ukrainian citizens have formed organizations among themselves and are attempting various sabotage attacks inside the Russian borders. Ukrainian insurgents are not only harming Putin but also sabotaging some Russian oligarchs who support Putin. In recent months, Ukrainian insurgents set fire to the store of a Russian oligarch who has close ties with Vladimir Putin. Not only that, a warehouse of the Wagner mercenary company in Russia was blown up by these insurgents. What was inside this warehouse was kept secret by the Russian government. But the real target of the Ukrainian insurgents is Vladimir Putin's energy facilities, one of his biggest sources of income. The Ukrainian insurgents who have attempted to sabotage many natural gas facilities and pipelines in Russia are aware that this will cause great damage to Putin. The Russian people are now very frightened by this situation. Russian citizens have begun to think that Vladimir Putin is unable to ensure the security of Russia's borders and have lost their trust in Putin. The Russian economy, which has entered a turbulent period due to the sanctions imposed on Russia by the US and Western countries, and the long presence of the Russian army in Ukraine, continues to make the Russian people uneasy. Russian citizens are very uncomfortable with the increases in market prices due to rising inflation rates. Many experts and researchers say that Vladimir Putin will lose the next elections and that the end of the Putin regime is approaching. Thank you for watching us.